Welcome along to episode...
It's 30. This
30.
is number 30. We haven't actually...
And this is cool.
Yeah.
Season 2.
I think...
Can we call it that?
I think I can.
So after a little bit of a break, welcome back to Sweet Tea and Coffee, Season 2, Episode 30.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. We got a special guest in the house. You know him. Friend of the pod. Friend of the church. Friend to Blake and I.
Yeah.
Matt Murray's sitting with us.
How's it going?
It's going good. We're going to get into some of the stuff we've been talking about over the last few weeks with kind of the direction we're headed as a church and what that mindset shift looks like. We're going to talk a little bit about friendship and the work that is involved there and why that's important and then who knows what else we'll talk about.
So it makes sense we have Matt here because, like we said, he's a friend of all these things you listed a few minutes ago.
He's a friend of all these things. So welcome along. Let's go. Well, we said we got Matt in here with us today. And Matt, it's been a minute since you've been on the podcast with us. We were trying to think about it. I think you were kind of in single-digit episodes for sure, right?
Yeah, I think
he
so.
was towards the very beginning. So you had a little bit of a life update. You guys moved to the big city, right?
Yeah,
the
big metropolis.
The big metropolis, G-Town, Garrison,
Texas.
Tell us about moving.
Well, we got the opportunity to actually purchase a house that was previously owned by my grandfather, and so got a lot of special memories there. Really neat for us. Spent a lot of time there with my grandparents, many years ago, and spending Christmas and Thanksgiving and just random days together. And so we thought it was a really neat kind of a legacy thing to get the opportunity to buy this house and move in, and did a ton of work to it this summer, and we are living there and loving it. So
is this like a secret skill that you have? You're DIY handyman guy. I don't think going into this move that I knew that about you. And then all of a sudden you do flooring, plumbing. I mean, you're doing all sorts of stuff.
No,
so where did that come from?
It's just the grace of YouTube. It's really helped out a lot with this. And the fact that our next door neighbor, I used to work with him at a flooring store here in Nacogdoches. And so he actually helped me lay my floor. So he did all the hard work. I did all the easy work when it comes to that. But got the opportunity just to learn some new skills and really hone some crafts because of YouTube, and just got the opportunity to work on my house, and it was really a neat time. So,
what was the most challenging thing you tackled? Like, what was the deal where? Because I remember there was a story. I think I'm going to tell this right. I saw Blake's dad somewhere, Roger, friend of the pod.
Yeah,
and he said that he had run into you at Lowe's. And you remember this? I think you were there with me.
Yeah. It was we were working on.
That's right.
The rent
we were
house
working at your house.
Yeah.
Roger shows up, and Roger says, "I saw Matt at Lowe's, and he looked perplexed. He was figuring something out in those Lowe's aisles, about." And this was like while you were doing the remodel. Yeah. So, what did you have to scratch your head the most on? What was the biggest challenge?
Oh, I don't even know. That it all kind of goes together. I felt like I was a part-time employee at Lowe's during that time. I was there every day. I learned some of the people's names. I was talking to them, having conversations. I'll see you tomorrow. What's the next project we're working on? And I don't know if I could say what was the hardest thing. I mean, honestly, probably just the flooring because of we did the whole house, and it took time. So, but like I said, I was really thankful for my neighbor, helped me out, and just really thankful even for the Lord's provision in that, because I didn't have any clue that he even lived there when we moved in.
That's crazy.
It was just a neat little, I guess, God wink in that moment, So I don't know. It's cool.
I want to be honest here, because whenever y'all first started this project, I had been like in a 10-year war with this. It wasn't that long, but it seemed that long. I've been working in this rent house that I was trying to remodel the entire thing, and I was like, this is taking forever. And you said y'all were gonna like buy this house and try to move in at this date, and I was like, ain't no way that's happening. And I was impressed.
It happened.
How quickly he got all that stuff in, because I did flooring, all that stuff, and I wanted to.
Yeah, I think you were like in one bedroom in the time Matt did a house.
Yeah, they were like moving.
Yeah, and that's like I said, he's
he had a pro, man.
Yeah, I guess that's the difference of having somebody that knows what they're doing, and I'm like on YouTube while I'm trying to put this flooring down. Why is this not fitting together? So
he had a very methodical plan, and it came together. So
you got to surround yourself with those people.
I didn't have them.
That's awesome. Well, cool. Well, welcome along again. Thanks for being here. We want to talk a little bit about kind of a mindset shift that we're going through as a church. We've been talking about our vision, our strategy over the last few weeks. We've had meetings with our members where we've talked about some of this stuff, and then we're kind of introducing a little bit of a new concept where it's called community groups. And for a lot of people, they hear that name and they have a lot of preconceived notions about what that is. It's a program at the church. It's a thing I go to. And what we're doing right now, really in all of this, so not just with community groups, but really in all of this, what we're really pushing is a mindset shift from church being a place that I go where I do the Christian thing to a lifestyle rather, that I adopt because I belong to Jesus and live that life in the context of a larger community, a local community with names and faces and stories. And part of that is the pursuit of friendship. And, the three of us particularly have been walking through this stuff. We've talked to people for 2.5 years. And what's it been like? I just want to throw this out there to you guys too. What's it been like for you to get your head around that shift from planning and programming to lifestyle? That this is a life that we live rather than a set of programs. Because I think that's kind of the biggest thing that's going on here. In all of those phases, for example, the strategy, it talks about giving our whole lives an apprenticeship to Jesus and participation in his family. It's not our strategy is not Sunday school and kids programs, and it's a description of a life lived. What, from your perspective, what have been the challenges for you, even just personally, in kind of wrapping your head around it, and certainly from a staff perspective?
Well, I think it's interesting because we kind of started this shift, and then COVID blew everything up. But in a way, I think that's kind of helped us reshape our thinking of what's important and what's not. Because initially you do this and you kind of shy away from everything being programmatic and more relational. You almost feel, if you grew up in church, you almost feel like, are we doing what we're supposed to be? Are we checking off those lists of those things? And so that can be a little uncomfortable. I don't know. I mean, for sure, Matt, you grew up in ministry with your dad, and so much was built around the events and the day of the week of what we were doing at the church.
Yeah, that's one of my first thought was just if you grew up in church, heavily churched or whatever around it, you fight against that tendency to think program or day of the week or real, neatly structured moments to come to the church to expect things to happen versus just how does it happen in the context of our lives as we live our lives. Mm-hmm. And as you have that opportunity to have the creativity within the structure of your life, of what that looks like, because life happens in seasons and things change over time. And so that's why I think we even see those attendance dips and different things naturally happen in church. But so I think initially that was kind of the pushback, was just thinking, fighting against that old school mindset that I kind of grew up with, as far as the church offers all these programs and here's when the church is open and closed and you show up and you do your thing while you're here, versus how is it happening in the context of your life outside of this building,
Yeah, I think that's good, because I would say as we've talked about this with our people, that is kind of the first reaction is, okay, well, what does that mean we're going to do?
Yeah.
You're talking about this adoption of a lifestyle of being a student of Jesus, and nobody's hearing that and going, that's wrong. We shouldn't do that. Yeah. But the question is, okay, practically then, what does that look like? Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things we've had to come back and say, often is that doesn't necessarily mean that we're not going to do the things that you're used to. Rather, what we're going to do is, as we do those things, now we understand why we're doing them. That those, when we come to, say, Wednesday night and do a 6-week study on, whatever, well, why are we doing that? Well, it's helping to equip that life being lived as a student of Jesus. And I think as before, we would see those, and I know this was my mentality growing up, was being a Christian meant coming to those things, and it was like I would check that box, but how that related to the life I was actually living was sometimes pretty disconnected. As long as I kind of just kept doing the things, that's what made me feel good. And I think all we're really doing is saying, you live a life as a student of Jesus, and when we come together in these community environments, we're doing that so that we continue to learn and grow as his students, that the life and the activity is very connected. So I think that's been a challenge we faced is just wrapping our minds around, not necessarily we're going to stop doing activity, but when we do it, why are we doing it? So one of the things that we've emphasized in all of this is, and I think there's a lot of learning here, is the rollout of these community groups. And there's been a ton of questions about them. So I want to get into that a little bit. Not necessarily, this is not a Q&A about community groups, a how-to about community groups. I think what I want to get into today is just what are we talking about when we talk about community groups? Kind of just a definition. And just like we said before, where we're talking about adopting a lifestyle, what we're saying in community groups is that it is a community group is just a name, it's a placeholder, but what it is it's a type of relationship.
Yeah.
It's a type of relationship. Yeah. It's a friendship.
Mm-hmm.
And talk a little bit about, maybe we can throw this around a little bit. When's the last time, I was thinking about this the other day, because I'm preparing to preach a few sermons on friendship. When's the last time you heard friendship emphasized in the context of church? When did the last time you heard it preached on or emphasized? I mean, just that. I mean, even that name. We talk all about marriage. We talk about all sorts of things, relationships. But how often do we talk about friendship?
I mean, I don't know if I can place a time. And I'm trying to think of like the larger context of the history of the church. Is that something that's normally ever been taught? I don't know necessarily. I would think that earlier in the church history, because of the nature of the way culture was, friendship was so common that it's not something that had to be like, hey, you need to be interacting and having relationships with people, because you had to rely on other people to survive. And I think in the course of human history, as we've become more disconnected, that we've tried to fill those relational gaps with programmatic activities and tried to create like a silver bullet that gets it done quickly, And I think when you talk about the context of friendship, to me, it's like a long play thing, having an activity that maybe checks the box or tries to meet some of those components may or may not work, but it may be a relationship with somebody for 5 or 10 years is where you get to that level. So no, I can't say that I've ever heard preaching specifically on friendship or teaching.
Yeah, that's interesting. You bring up a really interesting point about kind of the cultural movement of, it just highlights the individual, puts the individual on an island, the centralization of self, and we are so self-absorbed and so on an island, and technology moves that way. Everything just kind of is moving in a direction that isolates and that has the individual standing alone. So I feel like this is kind of a moment, even in, this sounds like like a really big statement, but a moment in human history where if at any point in the life of the church where we needed to bring friendship and connection with one another as vital kind of back into focus, this kind of feels like that moment. It feels like there's a lot of people reeling from the impacts of the loss of community, particularly right now.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. I was thinking, I don't know if I can really pinpoint anything either as far as friendship. It's funny, I don't know, the two things that kind of came to my mind initially were through culture itself. And I thought of the TV show Friends. I mean, I don't know if people really dig that or not, but whatever. But I think that the culture in that mindset has really highlighted the value of friendship and how that looks as people kind of walked through challenges together throughout a long period of time. While the church hasn't, I don't think, necessarily modeled that extremely well from that perspective, I think culture did. And now I think about it culturally today with the influence and impact of social media, we're pushing each other to be more independent. It's more about me having these digital friendships and relationships. And that, I think that creates a challenge in the church itself because everything is happening behind a screen versus in person together. And so I just think that presents the challenge, but also gives us a greater need that we see for those to really exist. And I think that's where, for us, community groups really can have its value and take its shape because we see the need for authentic relationship happening life on life, not just, I commented on your Facebook post earlier or whatever. Like it's really happening in real time together as we struggle together, as we celebrate together, as we encourage each other through that. I just think about all the one another's in Scripture that we see and that we read, and that's where I think we can grab our value in community group.
Yeah, I don't think it's an intentional thing that the church necessarily did of but what happened is that the teaching and the activities and the programs all started to focus on the individual, like how to serve the individual and not necessarily how to foster what we call a church family, the relationship between the members.
Yeah, it's interesting. So tell us about, Matt, just kind of, if you were to describe in just a few sentences what we're talking about when we talk about community group. I mean, what would be kind of your, I guess, elevator pitch? What would you say if I just said, okay, community group, you're talking about type of relationship. Like, what do you mean? What are you telling me to do?
Well, I mean, I think at the heart or the core of it, we're aiming for spiritual formation, and I think that happening in the context of relationship where, and it's authentic relationship. It's not a superficial, which I think once again goes back into the program mindset of superficial, kind of shallow, it's for an hour a week kind of thing in the context of a church building or whatever. Like, I think it's combating that mindset to say we want spiritual formation in the context of authentic relationships to celebrate and to encourage, to really engage in the one another's of Scripture. Like I said, where we're going to bear each other's burdens. We're going to encourage each other. We're going to serve each other. We're going to weep together. We're going to, just all the different things that we see where we have the opportunity to be in authentic relationship, not superficial, with the purpose of spiritual formation at the heart of it.
Wow. Yeah. And that's going to be, so if authenticity is going to be a value in our community groups, if that's going to be something, we're going to say, we don't want these to be superficial. We want these to be authentic. What we're doing is we're kind of opening up the playing field in terms of what it looks like, right? Because authentic friendship for me, a 37-year-old father of 4 and, like that life I'm living, authentic friendship for me might look different than, say, a 65-year-old widow. And what is authentic friendship in terms of where it takes place, how it looks, times of the day, right? So it's going to look different. That might look different for me in the rhythms of life that I have than somebody else. So is that what we're saying? Are we really opening it up in terms of the way that it looks for it to match the individual? Or are we saying, no, authentic friendship happens when you gather at the church on Wednesdays from 7 to 7:30 and there's childcare provided and there's a meal and, like, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So how does that work?
I mean, I definitely think it lends itself to the individual, the season of life. There's no one size fits all in this, in this community group effort that we're trying to kind of launch and push people towards. Because I was just thinking, even growing up and how like natural friendships in school and different things like that as kids, you don't walk into a classroom with a checklist of things you're looking for. It just, those friendships happen, and sometimes they change and sometimes they evolve over time. And I can remember being in elementary school and even those friendships on a weekly basis, it was like, I didn't know if you were my friend or not, and it was very harmful. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about being together, sticking together through the thick and the thin, but not being a one size fits all. Like I said, I mean, I think depending on if you're in your 30s or if you're in your 60s or, the time you've got, or if you're working or if you're retired or whatever that looks like, you're going to find those times and rhythms around your life and how that looks. And so I think that's the beauty of even what we're saying. I mean, one of our core elements is commitment, but that just means being committed to being together, and being consistent in that, and not not feel like you have to fit it in this certain box. And if you can't fit it there, well, then you can't be committed to it. No, find the commitment level that you can be on your own terms, whether that's a Tuesday night or a Sunday afternoon or a Friday morning, or whatever that looks like for you, you find those rhythms that work for you.
Yeah. I think the hard thing about this and what it's going to, I'll just speak from my own personal experience, is that when you place the emphasis on authentic friendship, and then you say to somebody, the important thing is that do you have, when we're describing a type of relationship where there's commitment and there's accountability, that do you have that kind of relationship? That's really what we're asking people. Mm-hmm. And what that's going to do, and I think it's going to be a hard thing for us, because back to Blake's point, I think we're at a place kind of just culturally where those types of relationships are kind of few and far between, even within the church. That there's many of us that, as we describe kind of what a deep Christ-centered friendship looks like, even within the church, I think there's going to be many of us that go, I don't know that exists in my life.
Yeah.
And that's challenging. That's hard. That's, or it maybe it did before, and that person has moved away, or life has shifted. And I kind of find myself in this place where that may not really be a description of a type of relationship that I have. The challenge in that, I think, is that can be a little discouraging. When I have to look at my life and go, that can be discouraging. And it can feel daunting because, you're describing a type of friendship that sounds great, but if that doesn't really exist in my life, how do I get there? That seems overwhelming.
Well, but I look at that and I'm like, okay, that's an okay place to be in. I was talking with a shout out to Caleb Homer, talking to him last night, and
friend of the pod.
Friend of the pod. Hopefully he's listening. If not, well, you missed your shot. But anyway, we were talking last night, and we were talking about, like, in moments like this in ministry, so often we want to, like, attack something and have a home run, like we just want to knock it out of the park with one fell swoop. But sometimes you just need to get on base. And so I would say, in those people who are like, I don't have that type of relationship, well, I understand. Like, that's not going to happen overnight. But there's going to be just step into those spaces and start making relationships, and then it's from there. It's the long play game. I mean, it's going to take time.
Yeah,
and I mean that's what I would say. Yeah, great. It's okay that you don't have a relationship like that. That's what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and I want to maybe would be helpful. The three of us had a conversation a few days ago, and we kind of looked at each other, and the three of us are great friends. And I would say, as I like survey my life here in Nacogdoches, that I have deep friendship, and I could name people. I also am kind of at a season in my life where outside of the two of you, where we see each other all the time, it's kind of built in, and that's a blessing and a gift that I think we have, that it's kind of built in. I get to see you guys every day. And so there's that continuity in our relationship. But outside of that, is there anybody in my life that sees me on a regular basis, where I'm able to share my heart, where I'm able to share my struggle, where I'm hearing theirs, whatever. And to be honest, right now in my life, like those are relationships that have existed before, and people have moved or whatever else. And that answer for me right now is no.
Right.
And so part of this process for me has been, and I'll just tell you, for me, it's a really uncomfortable place to be kind of at point A.
Yeah.
But that's where I am. And I'm kind of at point A in these community groups, and I'm thinking and praying and going, okay, God, like I've got to there's part of this, like I got to get the courage up to step out there and initiate relationship and do the heavy lifting that could take a year of just being around somebody a little bit more and kind of upping the ante in our relationship a little bit so that it goes deeper. And I just want to tell you, that's uncomfortable space for me. And I think that's a lot of us right now. I think you would say, and I love that you said, that's okay.
That's okay. Yeah.
We want to kind of embrace that and go, it's okay that it's uncomfortable. It's okay that this might be new. And you need to understand that what the kind of relationship that we're talking about is not going to happen the first time you meet.
Yeah.
And so a huge part of this, one of the things we're emphasizing is commitment. A huge part of this is just going to be, okay, let's start. Let's start. And wherever we start, let's be okay with wherever we start. The point is not, the measure is not where we start. The measure is where it goes, right?
Yeah.
So there's, Matt, I mean, as we're coaching people in this, as I'm coaching myself and trying to get perspective, is that part of it, is helping people to understand this isn't instant coffee. This isn't just meet once and there's depth. That you gotta get your head around the long-term play.
No, I think so. I think part of that is also just when you realize that need that you have, like even as you realize that need, that's a starting point. Like that's where you're at.
And that's kind of a scary place.
Yeah. Embrace that though, and say, okay, I realize this as I survey in my life and kind of look around. I don't really have any of these deep, meaningful friendships in place. And so that's where I'm at, and now, God, would you bring me a friend? Would you bring somebody into my life at just the right time, who's going to walk alongside of me? And I totally believe that it's a matter of prayer, because like you said, I mean, it's not going to happen overnight. We live in this, such a microwave culture where we want it now and immediately. And if it doesn't happen on the first try, well, I got to move on to the next person. No, give it time. Allow it to, to kind of build up and to embrace that. I love what you said about sometimes you just got to get on base. I think about the World Series teams. They're not all hitting home runs every day. They're getting walks. They're drawing. They're getting singles. They're hitting doubles. They're getting those runs across the plate. And so that's that same process that we have to be willing to embrace in our lives, and just understanding, man, today's base hit might just be, hey, God, would you just begin to prepare somebody for me? Would you begin to prepare a friendship that I might not even see is out there, because I realize my need for that. I realize as I look at my life, I don't have anybody like that, and I need that.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that for me, as an introvert, the thing is that is the hardest is that I can't pray and then sit back and hope that somebody comes to me.
Right.
I would love it that way. I would love to eliminate the vulnerability of this. But what I've done, and I'm telling you, it's uncomfortable for me, but what I've kind of had to do is go, okay, as I've prayed, God, who do I already know? Who's already kind of in my life in some way, where there's been some connection, where there's been kind of some camaraderie already? And then am I putting myself in spaces and scenarios where I might even discover that? Because if I go hide out, if I never show up to Sunday school, if I never show up to, some of the other things that we're doing together, where else am I going to be in spaces where I might even have a conversation with somebody that would even spark the idea that, man, this is somebody that I might connect with on a deeper level. You don't have to even start a community group. Like maybe for you, that first step is, am I in any spaces with other brothers and sisters where there might even be a connection that would even spark a community group. And for some of us, that's going to be the starting point. And we want to also say, I think that's okay. That's okay. We want to just emphasize, this is a long-term play. And our conviction in all of this is that if we'll take our time in the beginning, and if we'll really, really understand the type of relationship we're talking about, take our time at the beginning, that these are relationships that will last. And we're not looking for how fast we can start something. We're looking for how deep and long-lasting it becomes. That is the goal. The goal is that thing that happens that's measured in years, not weeks. And so we're willing for this to be slow and awkward and tough at the beginning because we see the meaningful end that again happens over a long period of time. So lots more to say about this. I think that's probably a decent place to stop.
Yeah.
I want to just tell you that we have got some really exciting guests coming up.
Yeah.
We're going to be, we've just been talking a lot about vision and stuff. And so we wanted to continue the conversation here, but the rest of the season, we got a long list of some.
We've got a long list of guests, and most of them don't know that they're going to be on the podcast yet.
So
but
I'm
going to be hunting them down.
So if you're not a friend of the podcast, you might be one.
You might
soon.
become a friend.
You
soon.
could become one soon.
Yeah.
And we really have, and some of these guests have come because of your input. That you said, hey, this, you need to listen to this person's story or whatever. So seriously, we got some really cool people coming on and some neat stories that are going to be shared. So stick around if you want to reach out and give us any ideas or feedback. I want to also say, if you're part of our church and you're going, okay, I've just got questions about community group, Matt, Matt is here as he's serving as kind of a coach in this, like wants to chat with you, wants to hear your story, wants to help guide you in this. If he can be a resource, reach out to him. You can find his contact info on our website. You can email the show at stc. I took your job.
FredoniaHill.org. I'll take the back end of that address.
But thanks for sticking around with us. We'll see you down the road. Adios.